I've been waiting way too long. Yeah, I've been down here trying to get it. Yeah, I've been waiting way too long.
This is the video for Algebra Unit 7, Lesson 2. We're going to be factoring polynomials when a equals 1. Now, what do I mean a equals 1? So the polynomials that we're going to be factoring are all going to be in standard form for a quadratic equation. So this is standard form of a quadratic equation. And we will be studying more about quadratic functions in the next unit. We need to do this before we get to that, though, because we're going to need to apply these concepts with quadratic functions and quadratic equations. So this is standard form of a quadratic equation. So when I say a equals 1, I'm talking about the coefficient in front of the x squared term. Now, it doesn't have to be x. As you can see in the second example, we're using m instead of x. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what the variable is. So as you can see, the leading coefficient is 1 in all of these examples. So that's what we're working with. We're going to start simple and work towards a little bit more difficult moving forward. So our first example says x squared plus 6x plus 8. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get factors that are going to be two binomials. So our example is a trinomial. It has 3 terms. And our answer, which is going to be really just a simplified version of this, is going to be 2 binomial factors. And so what needs to happen is I need to be able to multiply 2 binomials to get this trinomial. So if you look at the first term, x squared, that means that your first term in both binomials has to be x and x. Why? Because when I multiply x times x, I'm going to get x squared. Let me back up just a second and let me review with you how we multiplied binomials. So for instance, x minus 4 times x plus 3, I showed you a couple different ways, one of which was the box method, where we wrote it out like this, and we did x times x is x squared, x times negative 4 is negative 4x, x times 3 is 3x, and negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And then we combined our like terms, and we would get x squared minus 1x minus 12. So now what we're doing is we're starting with this, and we are working backwards to get our factors. So that's really all we're doing here. So I'm going to show you a really easy way to do that. So like I said, the first thing is if your first term is x squared, then your first terms in the binomials will be x and x. Now we have to figure out what our second term is going to be. Okay, well think about how did we get this negative 12? The negative 12 came from multiplying 3 times negative 4. So my term here is positive 8. So I need to think about how could I multiply 2 numbers to get 8. So I'm going to just make a table here. I'm going to put 8 at the top, and let me just write out all the options. So one option is 1 times 8, that's 8, or 2 times 4. Now, this is a positive 8, and so my factors are positive, but it's possible that I could multiply negative 1 times negative 8 would still be a positive 8, just as a negative 2 times a negative 4. So don't forget about those options. Now, go back to the green example I worked over here. The negative 1x, where did that come from? Well, it came from combining the 3x and the negative 4x. Where did the 3x come from? It came from multiplying that times x, and the negative 4x came from multiplying that times x. So as you can see here, we ended up adding 3 and negative 4 to get negative 1, which was our middle term. Our middle term in our example is 6. So we need to pick one of these pairs that add up to 6. So 1 plus 8 is 9, so that's not an option. 2 plus 4 is 6. That looks good. Negative 1 plus negative 8 is negative 9. We don't want that. And negative 2 plus negative 4 is negative 6. We don't want that either. So these are our key factors. So that means I'm going to put a plus 2 here and a plus 4 here. And it doesn't matter where you put those because your first term is the same in both anyway. So then, just as we did in the last video, you can check your answer. So now what I can do is I can use the box method, x plus 2, x plus 4, and I can multiply to see if I end up with actually what I started with. So as you can see, the 2x and the 4x do combine to the 6x. So yes, this is the correct answer. So again, let me just emphasize that this is the correct answer. Let me write it a little bit more clearly. X plus 2 times x plus 4 is the answer of the factors of that trinomial. We're not solving anything, we're just factoring it so that later we can solve. All right, our next example is a little bit different, just slightly. So again, I'm going to have my two factors, and my first term in each is going to be m, because I have m squared. So now I need to make a table of factors of negative 14. That's my c. That's what I need these two numbers to multiply to get the negative 14. Notice that it's a negative. So how do I multiply two things to get a negative? Well, one of them has to be negative. So negative 1 and 14, or it could be 1 and negative 14. You'll see why that's important in a second. Or we could do negative 2 and 7, or 2 and negative 7. I believe that's our only options. Why is it important that we have both of these? Because when I add negative 1 and 14, I get positive 13. When I add 1 and negative 14, I get negative 13. So those are two different answers that would give me two different results. So now what is my next step? My next step, remember, is that I need to figure out which one of these, 1, 2, 3, or 4, add up to 5. So we already added the first two. Those are out. Negative 2 plus 7 is 5. So that looks like it is the answer. There is only going to be one answer every time you do this. So once you find it, you can stop unless you feel like maybe you're not confident in that. So I'm going to put a minus 2 here and a plus 7 here. And again, I'm just going to real quickly do the checking of this. So m minus 2 and m plus 7. M squared minus 2m plus 7m minus 14. 7m minus 2m is 5m, so this is the correct answer. Last one. A squared minus 5a minus 24. So here's my factors, a and a. I'm going to make my table for negative 24. Negative 1 and 24, 1 and negative 24. Negative 2 and 12 to negative 12. This one has a lot more options. Negative 3 and 8, 3 and negative 8. Negative 4 and 6, 4 and negative 6. And I think that's it. All right, so I need the pair that adds up to negative 5. I need them to add up to negative 5. So that for sure is not going to add up to negative 5, neither is that. Negative 2 plus 12 is 10. 2 plus negative 12 is negative 10. Negative 3 plus 8 is 5, but I need negative 5. 3 plus negative 8 is my answer. Right? That gives me negative 5. So I'm going to put a plus 3 here and a minus 8 here. And again, if I were to multiply this, a plus 3 and a minus 8, I would get a squared plus 3a minus 8a minus 24. 3 minus 8 is indeed negative 5. So here is our answer. Again, we're not solving anything. We are simply factoring a trinomial so that later in problems we can use that as a method to solve.
I've been waiting way too long.